Join with me in knowing Divine Source, the one energetic space living, experiencing, expressing life at the center and circumference of all that is. Knowing that source is the truth of each one of us. I know each of us is a divine, unique, and perfect expression of creative energy. I know and accept that we are all here by divine appointment. As we hear the words spoken today, know the energy and intention that flows. We recognize and resonate with a connection of source, receptive and open to the experience. We flow even in the bumpy parts with ease and grace, knowing that what we hear today is perfect for each of us in its own way. And so for this knowing, I am filled with gratitude. I accept and am thankful for the impact of today, and I release this word knowing it is already so, and we say together, and so it is.
So I don't know about you, but this is how I approach hearing my callings. Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth your voice, and show me the gifts that are mine. Oh, speak, Lord, and in my heart I rejoice. There's a deep sense of love that wells up in me. Oh, I am a miracle of Spirit divine. May thy will be done through my hands and my feet, through surrender to the one. May my thoughts and actions lead the way to heaven, and may thy will be done. Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth your voice. Show me the work that is mine. Oh, speak, Lord, and with my hands I rejoice, for my hands are the presence of your grace in action. Oh, I am a vehicle for Spirit divine. servant heareth your voice, and show me the path that is mine. Oh, speak, Lord, and in my soul I rejoice, for that deep sense of peace that sets my spirit free. My life a humble offering to Spirit divine. May thy will be done through my hands and my feet, through surrender to the one. May my thoughts and actions lead the way to heaven, and may thy will be done. May my thoughts and actions lead the way to heaven, and may thy will be done.
Thank you, Intuit. Beautiful calling. What a great title. Hey, let's write about it. So I already messed with Gregg's head earlier, and when I introduced myself to him, I was saying, well, you spoke here before, and he goes, I did? I don't remember. I said, yeah, you did. He's going, oh, I did. The power of me convincing him. Then somebody reminded me that was a Silomar. So, okay, so you won that one. But you impressed me so much, I took you home with me, and I've been having you here in the inspiration of all that we've built. So I have met him at the Silomar, which is a conference that the Centers for Spiritual Living put together, and he was the keynote speaker, and the book that I was introduced was The Callings, and the workshop that I think Robin was referring to. Truly an inspirational man. And so if you don't get a chance, I hope you can come to the workshop today, because this is a privilege to have him here. But check out his website. It's filled with some phenomenal, rich gems of passion for being who you truly want to be. And in particular, there's a pictorial, which I really appreciated, how your drawings that you kind of drew down on how you went from where you were. He kind of drew pictures of that to how it led him to his passion, to his calling. So there's just such a rich information at his website. He's written a couple of books, The Callings, which are on sale at the back table by Gregg, so you can see him after the service today and purchase one of the books directly from him. And this is Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life. An authentic life. And also Vital Signs, his second book, Discovering and Sustaining Your Passion for Life. Both of these things stir a deep longing inside of me. It is a touchstone of my journey, and I appreciate you being a part of that. So he's been a keynote speaker at many conferences, the Unity Worldwide Ministry Conference, the Smithsonian Institution, EPA, National Conference on Positive Aging, Microsoft, many other corporations. He has a whole long list of who he is, but instead of hearing about words about someone, let's see his spirit. So Gregg Levoy, thank you for taking your time to be with us.
All right. Thank you for that generous introduction and for reminding me that I'm not crazy after all. That's always a nice thing to hear. And good morning. I think I'm going to jump right in. When I was back in college, I learned a critical lesson about human nature, and a lesson that has everything to do with the work that I now do in the world, from a psychology class that I took. In the middle of the semester, the students in this class pulled a prank on the professor, and it was based on what he was teaching us at that point, which was called classical conditioning, okay? So most people know about this through the experiment using the famous Pavlov's dogs, right? Who were taught to salivate at the sound of a ringing bell. And I read recently that Pavlov's dogs is also the name of a perfume, which has very interesting implications, I think, for the menfolk. But this is what we did. We took advantage of the professor's habit of pacing back and forth in front of the lecture hall when he delivered his lectures. So what we devised is that whenever he paced over toward the windows, we very subtly pretended to be bored, okay? So he slouched and fidgeted and doodled and stared vacuously into outer space, which actually by mid-semester it turned out some of us were pretty accomplished at. Whenever he paced over toward the door, we now, again, very subtly, pretended to be interested, all right? So we sat up a little straighter and we started taking some notes and fixing with keen scholarly expressions. By the time that day's class was over, we had our psychology professor glued to the door. Singularly the highlight of my college years. And I could have only been more thrilled if when the bell rang at the end of class, he would begin to visibly salivate. He robbed us of that pleasure. But what I saw in that experiment was something I had kind of intuited my whole life up until that point, but never actually seen demonstrated so clearly. And that is how incredibly easy it is to condition a human being. All right? By extension, of course, to be conditioned. And without a word being spoken. Not a word. The entire experiment was conducted in pantomime. And I figured if it took us, 50 minutes to condition our psychology professor with a new set of behavior, a new direction in life, if you will. I tried to imagine the effect on me of a lifetime's worth of that kind of conditioning by the time I was at that point 18. All right? The effect of thousands upon thousands of messages that every one of us got while we were growing up, and that effectively instructed us in the rules of the game. All right? What dreams are and are not bankable, what is and isn't possible, how are you supposed to behave in public? What is the reigning definition of success in the culture? What are you personally capable of? Who pulls the strings in this game and who dances? And I think the cumulative effect of a lifetime's worth of that kind of conditioning effectively forms a kind of hypnosis. Really, it's a kind of hypnosis. And I don't even think it matters whether the messages you get are negative or positive, or false or true. Right? It's a kind of hypnosis. And is that me? Oh, okay. Our technicians are working on it as we speak. All right. And the fact is that every kind of human community passes along the message that conformity is rewarded and failure to conform is punished. It's a holdover from natural law, because what natural law tells us is that those who leave the herd to go their merry way have a tendency to get eaten. Okay? It's more complicated in the human arena, but I think the warning stands. And even though, culture itself wouldn't exist without the glue of conformity, I think the individuals in it tend to pay a pretty steep price for it. And one of the prices that we can pay is losing a working familiarity with who we really are at any point in time. So I'm happy to switch to another mic if that works better. We might have to? No, I think we got it. Oh, you do? Okay, great. But seriously, I'm happy to, I'll just grab one of these or something. So, when I think of the notion of a calling, all right, a calling to me cuts through a lot of this conditioning, all right, because it emanates from the part of each one of us that knows what it knows, all right? The part of each one of us that knows where we leave off and other people begin. And very early on in the game, we know this. I have a friend down in San Francisco who told me once that she had a conversation with her 5-year-old, Janaea, who I guess wanted to do something mommy didn't think advisable. And so she says, Janaea, honey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. To which Janaea replied, with absolute innocence and certainty. You know, at 5 years old, we know where this line is, but mommy, you're not me. All right? This is the part of us that knows the feel of integrity in our lives and the feel of its absence. All right? And I don't mean integrity as a moral issue. I mean it as a psychological issue, being in integrity with yourself. All right? And it's the part of us that knows what kind of decisions it's going to take to make our own lives literally come true. All right? And by the way, I'm defining a calling very broadly, secularly. These are the urgings, the promptings, the signals, the signs, even the imperatives that come from deep inside your life and tell you what it's going to take to, as it were, stay true to true north, or true to the developmental imperatives of your life. In other words, the fact that they change over time. All right? And so will the callings that come through the being that's being called. Okay? So, and the fact is our lives are continually asking us to reinvent ourselves from beginning to end. All right? And nature has a pretty simple word for those who are unwilling to do that. Unwilling or unable to adapt to this fact of evolution, and the word is extinct. All right? And I think it goes as much for the individual as it does for the species. All right? So the kind of authenticity that I'm talking about, I don't think is even something people need to discover or learn or go on a great pilgrimage to find out, as much as I think it's often something we simply need to remember. Remember. And religion, by the way, mean exactly the same thing, which is to rebond. Religare in Latin, as in ligaments, means to reconnect. Okay? So in other words, it's something we already know at some level, or knew once and then forgot. All right? When I was researching the Callings book, I ran across a college biology textbook, and I was really struck by a passage in there that describes what happens in a fertilized human egg. And what they said is that as the cells grow and develop, very early on in the process, these little indentations appear in the round cell ball that begin the process of distinguishing one side of you from the other, the head from the hindquarters. Distinction that seems to be lost entirely on some people. 40 years after they're fertilized. But what they said is that if at this point in the game you were to take a cell and mechanically move it from the head to the hindquarters, what would happen is that it would migrate right back up. And what the book said, it knows what it's supposed to become. Imagine how that would strike you if you were researching a book on authenticity and following your callings and all that. We know what we're supposed to become at a cellular level. In fact, anymore when I hear people use this kind of language, I don't know, I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my cells. I feel it in my bones. I feel it in the very fiber of my being. Anymore, I think they're talking literally. Right? At some level, maybe they're talking literally. In fact, one of the guys that I interviewed for the Callings book is an artist who lives down in Santa Cruz, where, by the way, I just moved to from Asheville, North Carolina last month. I'm now a Californian. But this is a guy named Howard Ikemoto, and he described an interaction that he had with a 7-year-old daughter who came to him one afternoon and said, "Daddy, what do you do at work?" And he said, "Well, I work at the college, and my job is to teach people how to draw." And he said that she looked back at him incredulous and said, "Daddy, you mean they forget?" Can you imagine how that would strike a 7-year-old? That you could possibly forget how to draw. It's like forgetting how to dream or something, you know? But we do forget. You know, and as for how we go about remembering, let me share this. I did one of my Callings weekend retreats at a conference center in Western Massachusetts some years back called the Rowe Conference Center. And when I got there, I found out that there was one other workshop that was being conducted at that conference center the same weekend as mine, and that one was on the subject of tracking. All right? And I was thrilled by this because the two workshops being conducted there that weekend were both really about the same exact subject, which was the search for signs. All right? In their case, indicating the presence of animals, and in our case, indicating the presence of callings. So I got to talk to the people from this other workshop all weekend because we shared meals together in the dining hall. And what jumped out at me about that group was how excited they all were just about the signs of the animals. Not even the animals themselves. Frankly, they never saw the damn animals all weekend. It was the middle of winter in Western Massachusetts. They never saw the animals. But I've never seen a group of grown-ups and professional people so excited and articulate about the subject of poop in my entire life. Because it's one of the primary signs that they had to go by. And I'm sharing this with you because, well, I've always wanted to say the word poop in church. And now I've said it twice. It was because this was inspiring to me. And I shared it with the people in my workshop by way of saying, if we could cultivate that quality of enthusiasm just for the signs, just for the hunt, you know, just for the act of tracking our lives and paying attention to them and being in dialogue with them, I think they're gonna give us information we can't get any other way. They're not gonna give up their secrets unless we offer them some truly devoted curiosity. They're not going to. So I was inspired by that interaction that I had that weekend. And in fact, when I was interviewing people for the book, one of the things that jumped out at me over and over again in all those interviews was how many of the people I talked to had a practice of some kind in their life, and the whole point of it was self-reflection. The whole point of it was to strike up a conversation with themselves. In fact, there's a book out there called The Tracker by a guy named Tom Brown, and he says, this is interesting in the context of this conversation, he says, a track is the end of a string. At the far end, a being is moving, a mystery that leaves itself like a trail of breadcrumbs. And by the time your mind has eaten its way to the maker of the tracks, the mystery is inside you. Isn't that a beautiful description of the work of discernment? So the people that I talked to who had these self-dialoguing practices, that's what they were after. They were after a conversation with the maker of the tracks. All right, that's what they were after, a conversation, ongoing conversation with the deep self. And nothing extravagant either. Daily journaling, probably the most common. Dream interpretation, probably the runner-up. Artwork done in the service of self-discovery. For some people, therapy is a self-reflective practice. contemplative reading, regular short retreats. One guy said regular intimate conversation. Your participation in any kind of group whose members get together for the primary purpose of waking up. All right, so women's groups and men's groups and mastermind groups and spiritual groups and personal boards of advisors, even 12-step groups will do it. So this is something that really struck me, is the people who were the most receptive and responsive to their own lives had this receiver turned on through which they were hearing the signals and the signs and the calls that were coming through. All right? And one of the things that these kind of practices can help you do is, well, first of all, avoid something that the mythologist Joseph Campbell said was the great sacrilege in terms of the soul's integrity. This is his language. The great sacrilege is inadvertence, meaning not paying attention, stumbling along, bumbling along, not having your antenna up and your receivers on. All right? He considers that the great sacrilege in terms of the soul's integrity. All right? And you also begin to discover by doing this that there's not just one calling in there. You know, contrary to what you might have learned in, say, Catholic school, about there being one singular vocation per person, per lifetime. Your job is to figure this out before the curtain comes down. You know, there's multiple, how many people have ever had a sense of having more than one calling going on simultaneously, right? Some of you raising two hands, you know, because yes, there are vocational calls, but there's also relationship calls and lifestyle calls and moral calls and service calls and spiritual calls, and the ones you got when you were 20. Let's assume that maybe you got them when you were 20. Aren't they really different than the ones you're getting at 50? Ones you're getting at 75 maybe? You know, there's that developmental arc again, all right? So, I've seen this happen a lot in my line of work. People who wait and wait for the great big calling. You know, the vocational burning bush, and miss all the smaller calls that are right at their feet. And those are the fire drills for the bigger ones, in my opinion. You know, because calls come in a very impressive variety of forms. They come as intuitions. An intuition is almost clinically speaking a calling. They come as gifts and passions and dreams. Dreams. You know the novelist Tom Robbins? That name ring a bell? He said, dreams don't come true. They are true. When we talk about our dreams coming true, we're talking about our ambitions. All right? Johns Hopkins University came out with a study that corroborated that. It was a study of pregnant women. And they found that of the women who had an intuition about the gender of their baby, they were correct 71% of the time, which I was actually impressed with all by itself. Of the women who had a dream about the gender of their baby, they were correct 100% of the time. This is a Johns Hopkins study I ran across in Time magazine about 12 years ago. I mean, what does that say? We've got access to very deep knowledge in there, and we're sleeping through it. You know? Calls come as a decision that needs to be made in your life now, not backburnered another year. All right? They come as, where is there friction in your life? It's like in the natural world. Friction happens where changes are trying to take place. Right? So where is there friction? Head arguing with heart, passion rubbing up against security, walk not matching talk. There's a call embedded in that little drama. Right? Calls come through things like, and this is the level at which I'm going to encourage people to look at their calls this afternoon. Song lyrics you can't get out of your head for weeks. You know? If you know the novelist Ann Tyler, she wrote The Accidental Tourist, and she's a brilliant observer of dynamics between partners. She says, I can always tell what my husband is really thinking by the tunes that he absent-mindedly hums in the car. So, gentlemen, take note, because, you know, I'm in the mood for love is really different than tied to the whipping post. But this is one of the channels through which calls come, all right? And they definitely come through the body. The body. I have an entire chapter in the Callings book called The Language of the Body, because the word symptom means a sign. That's the etymology of the word. A sign of what? The word pathology means the logic of pain. What's the logic? Right? I interviewed a guy for that chapter who's a psychologist, who said, symptoms are usually dreams trying to come true. Think about that. Symptoms are usually dreams trying to come true. And right after that interview, I got it, because I went and did a presentation at a writers' conference in Albuquerque. And after the presentation, a woman came up to me, a complete stranger to me, and came up to the table where I was chatting with people and said, hey, you, do you know why I'm so fat? Which is not a question you're supposed to answer. And besides, she answered it. She said, it's because I have so many stories inside of me that I'm not writing down. And I thought, oh my God, there it is. Symptom as dream trying to come true. I get it. And then I went through my own files, and I now have a box full of those stories, not just my own, but other people's. You know, so this woman knew her body was trying to tell her something, and she knew exactly what it was. The dream was, I need to be writing. And the language she used to describe this is, these are stories that are pushing out from inside of me. That's actually how she languaged it. All right? I'm going to wind up with this. By the way, no, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Because I'm talking about all these signs and these signals coming through to us, and these are sort of the beating heart of the spiritual practice of discernment. All these signs are really useful unless they can't get through. You know, and calls have a tough time getting through when they get nothing but busy signals. We're tying up the lines constantly with busyness as usual. All right? So I read this story in the New Yorker a couple of years ago, and it's written by a guy named Adam Gopnik. And it's a story about his 3-year-old daughter who has an imaginary playmate named Charlie Ravioli. And you should Google, that's the phrase you would use to Google the story, because it's quite a commentary on the culture we've created. So what he's saying is that there's nothing unusual about a 3-year-old having an imaginary playmate, except this one is always too busy to play with her. She's calling Charlie Ravioli up on her toy cell phone and always having to leave him messages. Okay? A month later, her father discovers she's now leaving messages with somebody named Lori. He says, honey, who's Lori? And in her 3-year-old fashion, she explains that this is Charlie Ravioli's assistant. This is somebody he's apparently hired to return his phone calls for him. How pathetic is this? And maybe I'm being overly sensitive or something, but when our 3-year-olds' imaginary playmates are too busy to play with them and start hiring agents, for crying out loud, to return the insistent phone calls of the children who imagine them to begin with, it's time to move out of New York. Or rearrange your priorities or something. Because the compulsion toward busyness is a pretty good definition of workaholism. The experts just call it a process addiction instead of a substance addiction. All right? And it's one of our very few socially sanctioned addictions. Right? One of the very, very few you can put on your resume. As you might know, you can't do that with most addictions. 2004 to the present, alcoholic. No. But you could put workaholic, and people will be impressed. All right? I just wanted to say that. Even if all of our works are good works, even if all of our busyness is in the service of worthy and noble causes and callings, when the means to those ends is an addictive process, I think the end result is a loss of soul. I think that's my point, is a depletion of spirit. All right? So I will wind up with this. I used to be a reporter for the Cincinnati Enquirer back in my 20s, and one of my favorite stories that I ever wrote in the years that I was there was a story about the circus coming to town. This was Ringling Brothers, back when they existed. And I went down to the train track because they travel around the country on a train, and the animal trainer, the primary animal trainer at Ringling Brothers, said that riding bareback on an elephant at the head of the Barnum and Bailey Circus Parade through downtown Cincinnati at lunch hour would add color to my story. Okay? So, contrary to my Jungle Book fantasies about how you actually get up on an elephant, which was being airlifted on its trunk. For some reason, that's how I thought it was going to look like. The only way to get up on the elephant was to use a plain old aluminum ladder. And the only way to stay up there during the parade was to hang onto the elephant's ears. Okay? So those of you who have ridden bareback on elephants, you probably know about this already, but elephant ears have a really unpleasant habit of flapping a lot. Okay? And we're talking elephant ear flapping. You know, this is not like, kitty cat twitching. And the only way to stay up on the elephant was to remain extremely flappable. Because otherwise I'd have been thrown, and it was 15 feet to the ground in front of everybody, you know. So you have to picture, I'm the first thing anybody saw in this parade, right? And I'm wearing my business clothes because he sprung this bright idea on me at the last second. I'm wearing my business clothes. My pants are scrunched up above my knees with the black socks. It was just a fashion tragedy. And I'm the first thing anybody saw in the parade. And I'm pretty sure I did not capture the theme of the show. You know, the greatest show on earth. Pretty sure I captured another one of P.T. Barnum's famous themes. There's a sucker born every minute. I think I got that one. In looking back on that experience and on what I have learned since then about what is involved in following a calling, that experience has a lot in common with it. In that I was caught by surprise and carried off by something much bigger than me. It was nerve-wracking and thrilling simultaneously, and the elephant couldn't have cared less. And what I mean by that remark actually is that my soul doesn't seem to care what price I have to pay to follow my calls. This seems like a design flaw to me, but seems like it ought to care. But my happiness and my security and my vanity and my popularity don't seem to matter to it. It's not interested in making me rich or famous. It's not interested in whether I live a comfortable life. Not even interested in whether people like me or not. What does seem to matter is hanging on to the elephant. The willingness to go for the ride, the big ride, you know, the one that ensures that someday, if your life happens to flash in front of your eyes, at the very least, it will hold your interest. That much at least. We deserve at least that. So I just want to say in closing that the workshop this afternoon is a very hands-on opportunity. This is not going to be lecture format. It's a hands-on opportunity to explore what your own life is calling for from you at this juncture. In any arena, vocational, creative, relational, it could be any arena. But the operative question we're going to have at is, what's trying to emerge in your life right now? What wants to happen? You know, what's knocking on the door for an entrance queue? So I hope you'll come. And thank you so much for inviting me back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Knowing the one source, we experience connection and we remember. And in that remembering, we know truth. And as that truth comes to us through the words and the wisdom spoken, we resonate with the message and are filled with gratitude, filled with thanksgiving for this experience. I release this word, knowing it is so, and we say together, and so it is. And into it, yay!
It's amazing when you listen to what's coming through, what Spirit will do.
You got to make yourself available. That's what this song is about.
It's called Remember, by the way.
And we didn't talk about this ahead of time.
Your light shine for all to see, and surrender to the feeling in your heart. Let it guide you to where you want to be. Just remember. Surrender to the fear.